Because now we're going to be discussing the future of DeFi, opportunity, challenges, and challengers. So I would like to also welcome to the stage Gaspard and also Seraphim. Welcome, welcome. No worries. So Anton, we already know who you are, but for the other two, please could you shortly introduce yourself and what area of DeFi you most care about?
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, cool. Seraphim from Lido. I call myself DeFi expansionist. I came up with that, so that's what I do. And I care about liquid staking, I suppose, in DeFi.
Gaspard Peduzzi. I have a background in computer science, and I care about making DeFi efficient.
Cool. Really simple and quick. So we started at a high level, and obviously there's a D in DeFi that stands for decentralized. And the idea is decentralization can make blockchains, I guess, censorship resistant. But in DeFi, also with the increase in regulations, kind of really how censorship resilient is DeFi, and how can it continue to be so?
It's not decentralized mostly. Most protocols are not decentralized. They're handled by a bunch of multi-sigs, and you could override it. But not all of them, which is a good thing. So there's plenty of examples where it works perfectly well, like Liquidity, Uniswap, which is, it's nice, it coincides with the fact that they're quite big. But the reality is most DeFi is not decentralized, and whoever works in the space knows that.
Completely agree, and to add to this answer, even when it's not a multisig, it's not necessarily decentralized, and to build decentralization, you need some kind of inertia that often is something that you need to wait or build up in a longer time frame than what we have currently. So we have a lot of protocols, even with on-chain governance, that are completely not decentralized at the moment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I think that every time someone is trying to censor the DeFi or entire layer 1, it's kind of challenge for layer 1 developers, and they are trying to fix it on their end, because previously there was no much talks about it and it was not an issue. But recently everyone saw that it's possibly an issue which we could face in nearest future, and developers are trying to solve it to make it much more free, to have a freedom here. As far as I can see, the regulated DeFi is probably kind of subset of DeFi, and any other kind of restriction, regulation, censorship, it's for subset of DeFi. We will always have superset which work permissionlessly, but DeFi is such a freedom which allows subset of its users and projects to self-restrict each other with KYC or anything else. So it should not be restricted to have restrictions.
And building on top of that, like you mentioned KYC, and I think one of the terms is kind of institutional DeFi, where you have to KYC. What are your guys' thoughts on KYCing DeFi protocols?
Yeah, I don't like it, obviously. Like, there's KYC on the secondary level especially, something that's just not composable within DeFi. People trying to come up with like tokens that if you transfer them, you need to be KYC, and it just doesn't quite work. I think it could work at the primary minting stage, like Tether or like certain things like that. That could work, but not on the overall level. I think the better approach is to create assets that are permissionless, like stake teeth or whatnot, and put those assets within the hands of people that need KYC, like TradFi entities and hedge funds and family offices, while we don't need to do that as DeFi. We just create a product, and they can KYC it. You know?
Agreed. I think it's a question of layers as well. And eventually, if we want to build that protocol layer, we should avoid having those kind of constraints and remain neutral as much as possible. And eventually, if you want to build a higher level product that needs KYC, then they will need KYC at this level, but not at a protocol level that we're building.
I have a cool example. I think recently one of French banks released own stable token, but it's not a real stable token. It's kind of meme, and people had a lot of fun in Twitter about it because it's like it's non-composable with almost any DeFi protocol. And trying to use it in Uniswap or Compound or anywhere else would just break these protocols because it's not compatible with them. It's not even compatible with ERC20 standard. It's what's trying to do, I'm not sure if it's competing with any other stable tokens. It's kind of different thing for some users, we don't know who. And that's where a regulated thing is not playing on the market it was designed for. The intention was to participate in this DeFi market, but what we see, they're participating in own subset of restricted something, and where most of the protocols are not possible to use.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. So like onto the challenges. There's a lot of hacks in DeFi. There's no way of getting around that. It's just a reality of DeFi itself. But ultimately, it gives the industry negative rep, both from the regulatory perspective as well from the user's perspective. If you get hacked, you've lost your assets, and that's that. What are your thoughts on hacks in the DeFi space, and kind of what do you think the solution is moving forward?
Yeah, I guess I know a thing or two about hacks. So, now, I think hacks is like a big structural problem because we have to be right every day, and North Koreans or whoever has to be right just once. And the question is, can you really build a multi-trillion-dollar industry around something where you have to be right absolutely every day, and they have to be right just once? And I don't think it could probably within the current framework. Like, quite a lot of people are discussing things like you can't just withdraw 100 million bucks from a protocol within one block. There probably needs to be some sort of a speed bump, settlement times, and that's the problem. It competes with the idea of permissionlessness, right? So the question is it a multi-sig that does that? Maybe there's a better solution, but my point is we'll probably have to come up with speed bumps and settlements and things like that for large transactions, and the question becomes, how do we do it? Do we do it in a way that is like TradFi, or there's a better, ingenious way? Without that, which is going to be like a torrent website thing where kind of, it will still be used, but it will not be as big as we want it to be. We want it to be like internet kind of level innovation, right? So yeah, we might need to do
you
that.
have an inkling of what it might be? Like, would it be on the application layer or would it be on the protocol layer?
Yeah, I have no idea. People brought up ideas, but they're mostly like basic multi-sig stuff, which basically slows everything. It becomes like you know, old school banks where grandmas approve transactions every 2 days, like HSBC nowadays. But I hope somebody comes up with it, because otherwise we can't scale, and we're going to be like, or we're going to be like TradFi. So yeah, then what's the point?
I think the velocity of the funds getting out is definitely an important point, but I would also say the velocity of the value getting in is to put into question, in the sense that only in DeFi you have that amount of value that goes in code that was deployed like not so long ago. And I think the more we mature as an ecosystem, maybe the less we will see those protocols getting all the funds at once. I completely agree with currently we have to be right every day, and that's a big issue. And I think maybe indeed with some more infrastructure block on those protocols, we might be able to restrain like big acts to empty a protocol in one block. That being said, I think also with maturity, people will maybe be more skeptical about putting too much funds into one protocol, and because we did see big protocols not getting hacked-ish in a longer period of time, and those are the protocols with the most value in it. So I think it's also about that kind of not necessarily due diligence, but letting time do things in terms of how much money is put into one contract at once, because for sure risk is a probability.
Mm-hmm. I want to say that there are some projects in DeFi who do educate users about risks. And yeah, there are a number of different risks, different types of risks in DeFi. And some projects, they educate users about that. So some users can estimate better. Do some of their earnings deserve this risk or not? Is it higher or lower? I think those projects should get more attention, more traction, to be integrated in user wallets, to make it kind of more accessible for users. And one more thing here is like the greatest feature of all the DeFi is its composability, how different projects could build on top of each other. And it's also important to understand here that it's compounding risks of different protocols, usually. And yeah, I see that situation is improving slightly with time. Like with each next year, we see that more projects understand what exactly they need from audits, what exactly they need from educating users about using their platforms. And I believe that it's getting better and better with time. So we see that number of hacks is growing, amount of stolen assets is growing, but that's because whole DeFi is growing. And I believe it's growing much faster than hacks are growing.
And to add something, I think you're completely right on one thing, is that information is lacking for the DeFi LP, the DeFi investor. We tend to appreciate a lot that things are transparent, but the information is accessible but not necessarily readable. And without this information, you cannot build proper risk management. So I think as long as we don't have that, we won't be able to have proper risk management framework in DeFi. And we will be exposed to the wildness of the space as it is currently.
Could you maybe talk a little bit more about what are the types of information that you would want to see around risk management?
Well, you know, for starter, when one protocol breaks, you tend to see the dominoes of it and realize, oh, okay, so they were actually deploying liquidity there. They were actually exposed to that protocol. So I think like the interconnection to understand the compounded risk that was mentioned, already that is pretty much needed. Like when you put on a pool, you want to know what are the weakest links, who are the owners, like every things that can make the system weak, you need to be able to see that, and then to put probabilities on top of that and just build proper risk management. I think it's great that we have all those interconnection in DeFi. That's the money Lego that we love, but also it is what is bringing the risk there, so we need to understand it properly.
Maybe I could just add, as a devil's advocate, I feel like with risk management in DeFi, it might give us a false sense of confidence, because just because we think, oh, this collateral is very liquid, it's not going to get manipulated, people start building leverage positions on top of it. So if you have a lending protocol, people are going to probably deploy into it, including DEXs, and because they think they know what the risks are, they're going to do that more and more. Whereas people don't hedge for the actual tail risk that cannot be quantified, which is smart contract risk, right? And it just shows you how systemic the entire thing is, and how risk management is just very hard to ascertain when it comes to smart contract risk. Like, again, if you have a bunch of DEX money plugged into a lending protocol or a stablecoin asset, and that thing gets hacked, suddenly there's no DEX liquidity. There's no DEX liquidity, there's no liquidations on other lending protocols. And you see how a 2008-like scenario just plays out in DeFi, while everybody thought they knew the risks, because that particular risk is just impossible to figure out. And that's where I think probably it's more about coming up with something more structural than just tools that show you what the risk framework should be like. It should be something on some kind of a layer one maybe level, or again, a structure on top of that, you know.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think one of the things you just mentioned was the person that's responsible, or the people that are responsible for that. And in the context of the previous conversations that we've been having around, especially Alexey's case, where the argument is it's a smart contract, there is nobody end responsible. Kind of how do you see that in DeFi, where especially in terms of like liability when something goes wrong in DeFi? Ultimately, it is a smart contract. Is it fair for the ecosystem to actually hold those people who designed it responsible, or, yeah?
You mean, should people go to jail for bad contracts, or? What can I say? I mean, let me think about it for another minute.
It's a tough question.
I think as builders, we have the responsibility of being transparent. Then when something breaks, it's not necessarily like it's the responsibility of the person that put the phones in it, like they trusted it. Eventually, if you're doing the best effort, by definition, you cannot do more. So I think as long as you're transparent and you're doing everything that you can, then that's the responsibility of everyone as well to manage correctly, like how you do things. It's easy to ape everywhere and then expect just to earn airdrops, liquidity mining, and increasing.
I can add that some of the most popular protocols, they has value few magnitudes higher than those projects teams can afford to refund or to insure using insurance. I think users should be informed about what risks are on them and what could be compensated, what not. Because, for example, like money markets, they have billions of assets inside of them, tens of billions, some of them. And it's absolutely clear then that if anyone would hack it and steal tens of billions of assets, those companies and teams who build those protocols, they were not it's not possible that they would refund it. There is no way. The only way what would happen, they could launch new version, try to fix it. Someone could investigate and try to return stolen assets. But for sure, the team and the company behind this, they can't solve it with their own responsibilities. They can't just refund it at all. They could probably take some debts. For example, they could issue new token and give it away to everyone who lost assets. And in future, those people will be able to get it, but it's not a common practice at all. And yeah, I believe that users should be informed much better on what exactly there are the risks.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily it covers it when you get this like disclaimer straight away that way too much information.
Actually, this should be in terms of services, but not much people usually read it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, and I guess immutability generally is a tricky concept because some protocols just don't need to be changed much. Like Uniswap works like a robot, Liquidity works like a robot. Lido doesn't actually need to change too much. And there's protocols like lending protocols where you kind of need to manage it. It's like a competitive prime brokerage at a bank. You need to offer new products. You need to increase, decrease leverage. You need to. That's why you got Chaos Labs and Gauntlet and guys like that. So it really depends on the protocol. But ultimately, I think you just can't hedge for everything. So as long as you're not trying to commit fraud of some sort, it's like in TradFi. You just make mistakes. It's fine. You shouldn't go to jail for that. Especially not for like a good piece of technology like Alex. Yeah.
That's fair. In a few minutes, I'm going to go to the Slido. If you haven't used Slido, you just go to Slido and you put in this code here, 232332. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, please upvote and choose some of the questions. One of my next questions, which is very open-ended, which is what are the opportunities you see for DeFi builders moving forward?
Yeah, I think generally for the future, the way that we kind of get bigger, we need to make sure that people that hate us need us. And what I mean by that is like, everybody kind of hates us, right? But they need to really rely on us, like banks, middle offices, back offices. So that's automated by Ethereum blockchain in some way. It's much harder for them to kind of nuke us, right? Or lobby against us. And that's what I think guys at Scroll or ZK Sync are trying to push, or Stake ETH. If that ends up on a Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan's balance sheet and they start coming up with structured products around it, pitching it to family offices, they can't actively nuke us as well. They might hate us, but they still kind of need us because now monetary incentives are aligned. So I think the point I'm trying to make is DeFi, we started to realize we need to get leverage and we're doing it internally, which is great. And we just need to make sure, that people that hate us need us. And that's how the future's going to be brighter.
For builders, I think we've seen an interesting piece of technology being released recently in terms of privacy, everything that you can do with it. It's, in a hackathon, it's always very easy to deploy, and you can build so many new things that you were not able to do it before. I think in terms of layer 2s and scalability, we are removing computation constraints that are now allowing us to build much more crazy things and interesting things in terms of cryptography as well. So yeah, I think those things becomes available now, and very much interested to see what the builders come with and what new things can we build now that we couldn't 2 years ago. Mm.
Yeah, I believe that there are like 10 more great ideas which are coming to be invented in coming years. As someone said, bearish market, bullish development. I would agree with that. On bear market, it's much more less news about crypto, and they distract developers much less. And yeah, I believe that we will see much more new protocols which were never existing before, like, I don't know, decentralized stop-loss orders or anything else, much more on-chain solutions, something new. And yeah, I believe hackathons is probably one of the best places where these new solutions could appear. I'm also myself going to do something on this hackathon, but kind of out of competition. I believe we have some ideas which could be pretty useful for others, kind of public good. And I hope we will do this on this weekend.
Cool, sounds good. This is kind of one question slash concern is with the increase in layer 2s, you mentioned layer 2s, there's potentially the effect of fragmentation of liquidity for DeFi protocols, bridges being like the interim solution. And like my question is, okay, I'm a developer and I want to develop within the EVM ecosystem. I then have to start making choices. Am I going on main chain or mainnet? Am I going on an L2? Then which L2 do I now pick? Do I go with a zero knowledge? Like, how do you guys think about that decision process?
I think multi-chain and multi-layers doesn't necessarily imply fragmentation of liquidity. I think you can choose what are you using for which reason, and eventually you can actually build good UX without having to switch wallets, networks, and that kind of thing. So I think we're just starting to see pieces of infrastructure that allow that. We're building ourselves something on Starknet, and we're like managing to do that without imposing that as a constraint for the users, and very eager to see how we will have apps, protocols working in a very seamless fashion, leveraging the best of the technologies, making the right constraints and compromise there. And that would not necessarily split the liquidity. We don't have to deploy the same protocol on all networks and just hope that liquidity will come everywhere and use bridges to arbitrage that. I think we can build a much more efficient system.
Yeah, I think what's cool, I used to think that it would fragment liquidity a lot, but what happened is layer 2s and layer 1s started to differentiate themselves. Like, everyone has a different vibe. Arbitrum's kind of like a, I don't know, degen whale kind of vibe. BNB is like a non-Western degen stuff. It's just different kind of users, and I think that's the nice thing about what happened within the year, that every L2 and L1 has a differentiator, a different vibe that you should tap into. If you want to, like, you should probably go on all of them at once and you tap into different user bases, which is what, like, I wanted Lido to go to BNB, because it's like we're not siphoning away any funds from Ethereum mainnet. It's just a different kind of users. If you go to Arbitra from BNB, like Wombat did, they just tapped into a different user base. So everyone's got a different vibe. You should just, go for
vibe being a technical term.
The V, So yeah, go for whatever you like.
For projects, I think it's important to where start. Like, the very first they chain is usually important, and they usually, from what I see, they usually decide now from using layer 2s, like should they go with Optimism or Arbitrum or zk-Sync. And after they launched, after like a couple of months, if they feel that their project is like getting some traction, it's not that hard to have it working on multiple chains. It's not usually an issue for almost no one protocol to launch on multiple chains and be kind of multi-chain, but they don't need to support any cross-chain actually. And regarding the liquidity fragmentation, on layer 2s, it's much safer. I mean, when you use layer 2s, your liquidity is bridged via standard bridge. And this standard bridge of layer 2, it has the same security assumptions as whole layer 2 solution. So whole layer 2 network is the same safe as its bridge because it's native. And this liquidity looks like fragmented, but it's not far away. So users who bridge their liquidity among layer 2s and layer 1, they do not almost have any other risks. If they decided to go with this layer 2, they are fine with this bridge. And I mean, this liquidity is fragmented, but it's not far away. So for projects, it's much more important if they believe that small wallets with hundreds of bucks should be involved in their protocol. I think it's true that those wallets are more active on layer 2s because transactions are cheaper. Because it's hard to pay few bucks if you are trying to deposit 100 bucks. It's a huge fee. But on Ethereum, yeah, people are still capable to pay tens of bucks fees, but it only makes sense if they're moving some more significant amounts, like tens, hundreds of thousands. Yeah, it definitely makes no sense to swap 1,000 bucks and pay 20 bucks fees. Yeah. So it depends on the protocol. If you are working on something like huge for whales for their deposits, it makes sense to run on layer 1, maybe like layer 1 first. And if you're launching something which would engage more wallets with hundreds of bucks on them, it could be something non-whale oriented probably. Yeah, you should start with layer 2, definitely.
Makes sense. Cool, thank you. So moving on to the Slido questions, I'm going to start with the most upvoted to try and get some incentive of competition. The first one is from Goldman. What do you think of decentralized insurance or DeFi cover? And can that help with protocol hacks and how could it be implemented?
Yeah, so I looked into this at some point. The problem is, again, it's as easy to hack 20 million bucks as to hack 100 million bucks, so it doesn't quite scale. So I don't think most DeFi insurance actually... So DeFi insurance within DeFi, it's fine, but if you want to tap outside of it for the large capital sums of insurance, like DeFi is just uninsurable pretty much because of that steep, because the cost of hacking is the same pretty much. So that's why I'm saying that with increased amount of capital, there should be increased amount of difficulty of hacking, right? And only then we can be insurable outside of DeFi. Yeah, when it comes to insurance within DeFi, it's fine. It just doesn't quite scale with this. Like Sherlock can pay you 5 million bucks of TVL, but the TVL numbers on the lending protocol in billions, like, just doesn't quite add up, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think users are ready to pay the price that a DeFi insurance should cost. Maybe it will exist later, but right now it's just way too wild to be insured, in my opinion. But then it's a business that makes sense. So when things will be more stable, maybe.
From technical point of view, any insurance should try to connect pool of people who are trying to provide insurance, sell insurance of some protocol or some arbitrary risks. And on the other side, it should connect pool of people who want to buy insurance, be insured. And I see there is still a number of possibilities to build such protocols. It's just about connecting pool to pool. It's possible to build peer-to-peer. So like you can buy insurance from someone concrete, but it also makes important that you will return or your insurance will be halted in some amount of time. But if you connect people pool to pool and people are able to join those pools permissionlessly, and yield they pay or receive, or the yield they pay is should be determined dynamically. So to incentivize more people sell this insurance, or incentivize people to buy more of this insurance if it's too cheap. So yeah, it's kind of market-based solution, which makes it possible to do it in decentralized way. So decentralized solution here means that people are connected to people. Like in money markets, people are borrowing from other people. So if you deposit something and borrow something, those assets you deposit is used for others to borrow it. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, the next question is, how do you think about the future of KYCT? I guess that's Know Your Customer Transaction. If I'm incorrect, whoever asked the question, please shout. Is KYCT contradicting the decentralized vision while it is an inevitable trend to involve institutions in DeFi?
What does that mean? What?
I think it kind of relates to that at the beginning where we mentioned KYCing DeFi protocols.
But do you KYC a transaction? How does that work?
I think it's both KYCing the users and also KYTing, so knowing the transaction as well. So it's identifying the entire value chain of that transaction.
Yeah, same as what I said before. I think it should be done on the TradFi level maybe, but I wouldn't do it every step of the way, just not composable. Yeah.
Agreed.
I would say, as I said previously, yeah, DeFi here is such a freedom which allows subset of its users and protocols to play with self-restrictions.
Do you think things like verifiable credentials, digital identities, and soul-bound tokens may provide some form of solution for KYC in the space that enables composability, or do you think that's all like a pipe dream?
No, this could work. I mean, as long as you can remain pseudonymous on a base level and you have like some sort of, you know, like when you go on Twitter and people add you and you see common friends, that's how you judge if that person's real or not. Like, it could work exactly the same way in the blockchain. If I want to have a deal with someone, I want to know, do they know the people I know? So I don't mind that per se. I think that's probably going to work out. It's just as long as you can access the base layer with pseudonymity. But yeah, it's going to happen probably, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. The next question is, I guess, an opinion about perp, decentralized trading on DEXs. There are already protocols like Unidex, routing swaps via 1inch, or GMX doing that. Are these a challenge? Are they challenges to SEX's centralized exchange?
I didn't get the question itself.
I guess, what's your opinion about perpetual trading on decentralized DEXs?
Okay. I think it should expand in coming years because, as you may see on traditional markets, the spot trading volume is few magnitudes lower than derivatives market. And I believe that in decentralized way in DEXs we will have the same kind of ratio. So, but currently we see that derivatives market is much lower than spot market on DEXs. But yeah, this means that it will probably expand. I don't see why it shouldn't. So yeah, probably derivatives on blockchain is the next thing which will get a lot of traction in coming years.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree, like with everything else. We have to make it efficient, and then people will eventually move forward towards the decentralized solution. I mean, I don't use much of a centralized exchange anymore. You know, Ether at that time it was maybe a bit harder, but now it's seamless experience, works great, have liquidity, enough liquidity for me at least. So yeah, I don't see why it would not be the same with perps.
Yeah, I think what decentralized perps did especially GMX with their GOP, they created a new asset class, and that's the big advantage of a CeFi. Like, you can take GOP and do things with it, leverage it up as well. And I think the source of yield from GOP is pretty cool because it's not so like rewards driven. It's like an on-chain casino. Like, there's actual cash coming from people losing money because they over leveraged, but that's kind of how perp trading kind of works. And I think that because you can take that GOP token and recycle it through different protocols, that's something that CeFi didn't achieve yet. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. It's going to keep growing.
Yeah, and I guess a question to the audience by a show of hands, like, who uses DEXs more than sexes? Okay. That's around maybe just over half, I think. I'm happy with that.
What about you?
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks ever so much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
There you go.
Yeah. No. Yeah, no comment. Cool. Well, thanks a lot. And please give a round of applause for this panel, these panelists. Thanks a lot.